It was a nightmare, déjà vu scenario that it just, you know, brought everything back in a wave.
Fighting Spider-Man?
She lost her 6-year-old son.
And they knew something bad had happened. They heard the screaming, the shooting.
His daughter survived, hiding in a primary school bathroom.
Can you imagine, though, what that does to a 6 or 7-year-old when they see something like that?
Now, the court case that could force change.
Shooter, make ready. The SIG MCX is here.
You can't put a product such as that out in the general public and expect not to have accountability.
Tonight, we go back to the families whose lives change forever on the day 20 tiny children and 6 teachers went to school and never came home.
So have you given up hope that the gun laws will change in this country?
No, I have not given up hope. I think we're better than this.
And their fight to shut down the dangerous conspiracy theories.
Busted! 100% proof that Sandy Hook was a hoax.
What are they saying about your family and about Noah?
He's an actor and he never really died, and that we are all actors.
They're going to threaten you. They're going to tell you that you're part of a conspiracy. You're going to be victimized all over again.
We have lost hundreds and thousands of innocent people to gun violence.
Will America finally listen?
You can help us win this battle, America. Call your representative up. Call these Republicans up on the phone and tell them we want to vote.
His life energy, his appetite for life. He was a bon vivant. You know, he really enjoyed food and companionship, and he was very engaged in life. I think he had a lot to teach everyone about being connected.
It's a big deal for a mother to speak out like this, and yet you are finding the strength to do that. What are you hoping to achieve?
I think I'd like other mothers to hear me, to hear or grasp even a bit of the magnitude of the loss. I'm speaking on behalf of my son so that he's not forgotten.
In December of 2012, Sandy Hook, Connecticut, in the prosperous northeast of the United States, became a place of terror. With the doors to the school locked and students safely in their classrooms, shots rang out.
Sandy Hook School. Caller is indicating she thinks there's someone shooting in the building.
In a matter of minutes, 20 children, including Veronique Posner's 6-year-old son Noah, were slain, along with 6 of the teachers who tried to protect them.
We heard guns, and we also heard screaming and crying.
In the days and weeks after the slaughter at the primary school, few of the parents wanted to talk publicly. But we found Veronique Posner, mother of 5, determined that her son would not become just another statistic.
It's really heart-wrenching to see your child's name on a headstone. I mean, and it's heart-wrenching in any case, but it was just so sudden and a scenario I never entertained in my wildest nightmares.
Veronique sent her children to Sandy Hook School on that Friday big sister Sophia and 6-year-old twins Ariel and Noah. Noah's little body was riddled with 11 bullets from Adam Lanza's gun. Veronique, a nurse, forced herself to identify his remains.
I felt I owed it to him. I mean, I was his mother in life, and I'm his mother after, you know, no matter what.
Look at that, they're shooting back and forth. That is crazy. Look at this.
More than 3 years later, she woke to news of yet another horrific mass killing using a semi-automatic weapon originally designed for the battlefield. 50 people dead at a nightclub in Orlando, Florida, including the gunman. In almost 30 years in journalism, the Sandy Hook massacre was one of the hardest stories I've had to cover. I remember a colleague at the time commenting, "How do you write an obituary for a 5-year-old? And then how do you write 19 more?" I've thought a lot about that line and about the families, especially Veronique Posner, who I met in the weeks after the attack. Her son was one of the victims, Noah, his name was. 3.5 years later, I'm on my way to her place and I want to see how she's going.
Hi, how are you?
Look at you.
How are you? Look at your hair, you look fantastic.
Thank you.
You look great.
Come on in.
I find Veronique now living in a city a long way from Sandy Hook. She and her family moved after Noah was killed. It was too painful to stay. Is there a part of you, though, that felt torn about leaving the place where Noah last was?
Yes, I felt guilty about that. I definitely did, but it didn't take me too long to realize that, you know, for me to feel close to him and to think about him and his laugh and the things he would say, and I don't find that at the cemetery. All I find there is loss and bottomless grief, really, quite frankly. It's very, very harrowing for me to go. So knowing that, that guilt has really gone away because I feel close to him when I think about him, when I remember him, when I look at his pictures, when I, you know, laugh about something he said with the girls. I still haven't been able to watch films of him, though, but I do look at his pictures all the time. And we're sending you these balloons and hope they reach you all the way in heaven.
What was your first reaction when you heard the news from Orlando?
It was just, first reaction was just a wave of nausea, pretty much. Just that feeling of, here we go again, because we're asleep at the wheel and we're about to crash again. Because I knew before any confirmation was made that he had to have used a high-powered rifle to get the amount of casualties they were starting to talk about. It was a nightmare, déjà vu scenario that it just, you know, brought everything back in a wave. And my heart just went out to all those young people that lost their lives and their families, and just knowing they're just beginning that journey.
Shooter, make ready. The SIG MCX is here, and it's unlike anything you've seen or heard.
This is the assault rifle used to kill in Orlando. Developed for America's Special Forces, it can fire 45 rounds in a minute.
The SIG MCX eclipses everything that's come before it. It's the start of a new era.
A semi-automatic gun, similar to this, has been the weapon of choice in America's recent massacres. The San Bernardino slayings last September, the attack in a Colorado movie theatre in 2012, and at Sandy Hook Elementary School. When I first met Veronique, just weeks after Sandy Hook, she was calling for a ban.
They are weapons of mass carnage that are designed for the battlefield. It just has no place in society as I see it. I think they should be made illegal, and I think there should be compulsory buyback programs of these weapons.
Similar to what we saw in Australia.
Correct.
Are you shocked that Sandy Hook and the death of Noah and the other children wasn't enough to change things?
I thought the fact that 20 small children, as well as 6 educators, being decimated in a very short amount of time would be such a wake-up call for the nation. It shocks me. It shocks me that we seem to be, on one hand, concerned about this massive loss of life that occurs during mass shootings, or the statistics that are coming out of our American cities. But by the same token, there's a kind of complacency. And I think part of it is just the powerful lobby of the NRA and the gun manufacturers and the immunity that they enjoy.
And they've still got the power. I mean, we talked about it when we met in 2013.
Yes, and I think they've, the ice that they're standing on is becoming thinner and thinner every time one of these events happens. It becomes more and more difficult for them to rationally justify why we can't have reasonable gun control measures in this country.
The National Rifle Association, or NRA, is perhaps the most powerful and controversial lobbying group in America.
NRA, stop killing our children. It's the NRA and the assault weapons that are killing our children.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
Wayne LaPierre has been running the NRA for 20 years and earns $1 million a year because he's so successful.
Shame on the NRA! Ban assault weapons now!
At the first Senate committee hearings on gun control after Sandy Hook, LaPierre went on the offensive.
Law-abiding gun owners will not accept blame for the acts of violent or deranged criminals, nor do we believe that government should dictate what we can lawfully own and use to protect our families.
LaPierre said no to proposed bans on semi-automatic weapons and high-capacity magazine clips, and no to more background checks for gun buyers.
I'm a mom, and just like millions of other women, that's why I own guns.
Successive efforts to change gun laws are constantly blocked in Congress.
There are enough guns for every man, woman, and child in this country.
Only months away from finishing his presidency, Barack Obama calls it his biggest frustration. Just 2 weeks before Orlando, he was pleading for change.
I just came from a meeting today in the Situation Room in which I've got people who we know have been on ISIL websites, living here in the United States, U.S. citizens, and we're allowed to put them on the no-fly list when it comes to airlines. But because of the National Rifle Association, I cannot prohibit those people from buying a gun.
We have lost hundreds and thousands of innocent people to gun violence.
10 days after the Orlando murders, in an action reminiscent of civil rights protests in the 1960s, Democrats launched a 25-hour sit-in on the floor of Congress. They wanted a vote on legislation that would stop people on a terrorist watch list from buying guns.
We're calling on the leadership of the House to bring common sense gun control legislation to the House floor. Give us a vote. Let us vote. We came here to do our job. We came here to work.
Rise up, Democrats. Rise up, Americans. This cannot stand. We will occupy this floor. We will no longer be denied a right to vote.
You can help us win this battle, America. Call your representative up. Call these Republicans up on the phone and tell them we want to vote. America, you can win this battle tonight for us.
After the official cameras were switched off, they ignored a ban on mobile phones, instead using them to live stream their protests to social media.
To the Ayatollahs of Iran and every terrorist you enable, listen up. You might have met our fresh-faced flower child president and his weak-kneed Ivy League friends.
The NRA opposes the no-fly, no-buy proposal, calling it an infringement of civil liberties because many innocent people could be on the watch list and prevented from owning a gun.
I'm the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
Let me say something to every political hack pretending you know an AR-15 from a double-barreled shotgun in the wake of the Orlando terror attack. Stop talking.
With substantial financial backing from America's arms makers, the NRA spends more than $200 million a year promoting and defending gun ownership.
I was a SEAL for 12 years. Now I train average everyday Americans to protect themselves and their families. The only way for us to stay free was by having whatever guns the bad guys have. This firearm gives average people the advantage they so desperately need and deserve to protect their life, liberty, and happiness.
The NRA has support in the dark corners of the internet too.
It definitely fuels the conspiracy.
Incredibly, since Noah died, the Posners and relatives of other Sandy Hook victims have been fending off so-called gun truthers, online trolls and conspiracy theorists who claim Sandy Hook never happened or was part of a plot to take away guns.
Now, here's the phony, fictional, computer-generated Photoshop boy, the boogeyman, Adam Lanza.
All of these links here are of YouTube videos that have been taken down.
Right, okay,
So they're gone.
Noah's dad, Lenny, has dedicated himself to outing them on his own website and having the fake sites removed.
You didn't want us to show your face. Can you explain why?
Because of the all of the threats against me, all of the hate, all of the death threats. There's an active FBI investigation, and it's part of my concern, part of staying vigilant.
What are they saying about your family and about Noah?
Well, there are many conspiracies, many theories, many things that are being said, but one of which is that he is an actor and he never really died, and that we are all actors. It's just another anomaly in the land of conspiracy theorists. Different. When things don't add up for them, they don't need to connect. 3 years ago, every single photo was of this type. You wouldn't see anything real of Noah.
Then your hard work is paying off.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Definitely.
But they aren't all faceless on the fringes of the internet.
KU professor strikes a nerve here and across the country over his claim that the Newtown massacre was a hoax tonight.
James Tracy, a communications professor at a Florida university, writes that the Sandy Hook mass shooting was an elaborate hoax designed to pass gun control laws. He even sent Lenny Posner a letter requesting evidence his dead son was real.
There's a lot of emotion involved with something like this. Is there anything that you want to say to that person at home that's going to throw their shoe at the TV and say, this guy is a total nut?
Well, I think that we need to, as a society, look at things more carefully. Perhaps we, as a society, have been conditioned to be duped.
Tracy was sacked earlier this year.
I think that was a very strong success. I think it's a very powerful statement to make that that sort of behavior, that sort of activity is not acceptable. A lot of people that are conspiracy theorists and online throw around this freedom of speech concept, but that's not how it's defined. That's not what it means. It's not a protection from abusing people.
I'm just sort of a bit in awe of you that you are able to just take this on as almost as a duty, as something that you have to do. Because when I look up those sites and read what's written, I would just feel absolutely gutted. I mean, I don't know how you manage not to just feel such a heavy, heavy sadness about it.
I do, and I can't really explain why I've chosen that path, but it really is not something that I stop and think about. It really is the only choice for me to make. Someone is treating the memory of my son that way, and I have to absolutely defend the memory of my son. I have no choice. And conspiracy theories erase history. They erase our memories. And how will this event be remembered 100 years from now? We may not remember any of this. And so I think it's important, the work that I'm doing.
Fighting Spider-Man, and Spider-Man defeated the Goblin.
When I first came to Sandy Hook in the days after the tragedy, it was December. The town covered in snow and ice, a bleak atmosphere to match the mood. Now there's a sense of renewal. The years have passed and the seasons have changed, but being back in Sandy Hook, you cannot forget the horror that this town went through. Many thought that it would be the line in the sand when it came to guns in the US, that change would be immediate, but it's been much slower than that. How does a town like Sandy Hook recover from something like that?
You never recover. You just go on. And, you know, what I want people, you know, in the United States to realize is you think this won't happen to you. You think that, oh, well, you know, you hear about it on the news, it's tragic, and, you know, you can relate to it in some ways, but you think, wow, that was really awful. But then you go on with your life, and I tell every community, you better have a plan in place now. Do your school shooter lockdown drills, really assess, you know, your security thoroughly, scenario plan, and plan for the aftermath.
So where do you guys think we should set up in our usual place over here where we always go? Yeah, probably. Okay.
Eric Milgram's daughter Lauren was in the same grade as Noah at Sandy Hook Elementary School. She survived by hiding in a bathroom with Noah's twin sister.
And they knew something bad had happened. They heard the screaming, the shooting. You got to remember, this was an event that was so severe that seasoned first responders, people who've been on, you know, sites of shootings, car wrecks and whatnot beforehand, you know, many of them said this is the worst trauma, tragedy I've ever seen in my lifetime. But on top of that, some of those people were permanently disabled. You know, what they saw that day of the shooting was so severe that they just couldn't work anymore. Can you imagine, though, what that does to a 6 or 7-year-old when they see something like that? I know for a fact that Lauren, she did see things that she will not talk about to anybody. And this has changed her personality. You know, and it's hurtful to watch because beforehand she was so confident, so outgoing. And in the months after the shooting, she really clammed up, closed up.
Eric and his family stayed in Sandy Hook. He's got a sad warning for the families and friends grieving after the tragedy in Orlando.
Be prepared that when you speak out, you will be harassed. You know, you've gone through a horrible trauma. Be prepared that you are going to be harassed on social media. People are going to call your house. They're going to get your work phone number. They're going to threaten you. They're going to tell you that you're part of a conspiracy. You're going to be victimized all over again.
What do you think is the worst thing you've heard with the conspiracies?
That it never happened, that Sandy Hook never happened, or it was a government false flag operation to take away people's guns, which is absolutely absurd. There are far better ways, you know, to do that than to stage a shooting like this.
He's now part of a community group lobbying for more stringent background checks on gun buyers and thinks what happened here has raised awareness. Even so, he's not sure whether the type of gun that killed so many of his daughter's classmates should be totally banned.
The official position of the organization for which I'm a spokesman, the Newtown Action Alliance, they are fully 100% behind an assault weapons ban. My personal opinion, just to separate them, I don't know if I would go quite that far yet, but I do believe that we need to look at how assault weapons are sold, marketed, distributed, and we need to make changes.
In an effort to force change, the families of some Sandy Hook victims, including Noah Posner's parents, are suing the manufacturer of the gun used to kill their kids.
And I know you're here ready to argue the issue.
50 years later, it remains the gold standard military assault rifle. And there it was on the floor of a first grade classroom, having been used by a civilian whose only resemblance to a military person was that he dressed like one on that day.
And no court in this country has ever recognized that a product manufacturer, 2 and 3 steps removed from a retail sale, the actual supplying of a product, can be liable for negligently entrusting the product.
They hope the courts might achieve what the US government seems unable to manage, to strip the legal immunity enjoyed by the makers and sellers of guns used in crime.
What are you hoping to achieve with the lawsuit against the gun manufacturers?
Accountability, that you can't put a product such as that out in the general public and expect not to have accountability. Certainly, it's one of the few industries that enjoys that. I mean, drug manufacturers and tobacco or cigarette manufacturers do not enjoy that. There are consequences, and it's about time that people brought that to the forefront.
6 million guns are made in America every year, and it's estimated the weapons and ammunition generate about $6 billion a year in revenue. After every massacre, there's a spike in sales.
So have you given up hope that the gun laws will change in this country?
No, I have not given up hope. I think we're better than this. I wish a lot more had been done, but that doesn't mean that it won't get done. It just means that it's a long process. After all, there are changes that have occurred in civil rights in this country that a couple generations ago would have been inconceivable. Oh no, that's never going to happen. But the fact is we woke up as a nation to the injustices, to the abuses. And so this is our next fight. The violence in our society is our next fight.
Sandy Hook Elementary School has been bulldozed. They're building a new school in its place. But for the families who lost their children here, nothing will erase what happened. Noah Posner would have been 10 this year.
It is an awful truth, but we have to own it. It's part of our family's history. It's been agonizing. I have cried enough tears to fill an ocean, and I still do, all the time. But now we have to own it. It is our truth, and it's also the truth of many, many other families who, since Sandy Hook and before, have lost their loved ones, their children, their spouses, their sisters and brothers, friends, to violence, to gun violence, especially these types of weapons. I mean, I feel that connection. I feel that there's got to be a string of, going through all these victims, and our mourning and our anger and our pain's got to get heard. How many of us do we have to be before we're heard?